The reason they like reading my stuff is that I've always got real life examples to prove what I'm saying.
There's a lot of good people that listen to this podcast.
Other than God and my family, deer hunting would be next in line on my list of priorities.
From the bottom of our hearts, it's just fantastic and awesome to have the support that you guys are getting.
People ask me about expandable broadheads and love swings.
Chasing Giants with Don Higgins and Terry Peer. Brought to you by Osseo Camo, nature's most lethal camouflage. Follow along as Don and Terry discuss the techniques, strategies, and dedication needed to harvest one of God's most amazing creations, world-class whitetails.
Well, welcome everyone to the Chasing Giants podcast with Don Higgins. I'm Terry Peer. We're brought to you by Osseo Gear. Don, I believe September 24th is when this is going to air, and closer and closer to opening day in Illinois, but you've been on the road in Ohio, and I'm really excited to hear about that. I want to tee up a little bit about some new things that we're going to talk about today, and one of them is an Osseo spot. So make sure you tune in. The Osseo commercial in the middle of the podcast is going to be a little bit different tonight, so make sure you listen to that. And then we got some great questions to talk about later in the show. So before we move on, let's hear about this trip to Iowa. And I think you even visited some and did some projects around fruit trees, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, it was Ohio. I spent 3 days in Ohio this week. And first day I visited a 75-acre property that I just bought with my business partner. And he had a dozer there clearing plots, and trying to get those. There's 2 plots on that property. He's getting cleared. Probably already has it done by now. I'm going to get them seeded, set some feeders up and cameras, and see what's there. Then the next day I went over by Columbus, and I'll tell you what I learned. I've learned so much about apples here in the last few months. We did the video with Mike Mitchell at Oakall Valley Orchard and produced a video for the Whitetail Master Academy earlier. Well, I spent the entire day, visited 3 different orchards, had 3 different apple experts, if you will. 2 of those work at Ohio State University. One lady is she studies apple DNA.
Wow.
And very, very interesting. And then there was a apple breeder that's developed some apple trees specifically for wildlife, disease resistant, and he's teamed up actually with Jay Gingrich Tree Farm.
Fantastic.
He's going to market those trees through Jay, but he's the breeder responsible for developing those trees over about the last 20 years. Lots of details there. It's going to be shared on a video. Actually, I think the video might have been released today on the Whitetail Master Academy. And then there was a gentleman, an older gentleman, that he's a graduate of Ohio State University, but he's a 6th generation apple orchard owner, manager, whatever. His family's been in the apple business for 200 years. Those 6 generations, but he has several patents in his name for work he's done breeding apples as well. And it was just some of the things that I learned was just amazing about apple diseases, propagation of apples. What the typical orchard is looking for in the apples that they grow versus what a wildlife enthusiast would want in their apples, something totally different. So that was extremely interesting. That was the second day I was in Ohio. Then the third day, with my partners, we bought a 430-acre property, and we spent the third day there. Steve Shields was along all 3 days and was filming all this stuff for the Whitetail Master Academy. And I think there was 5 of us on that journey around that 430 acres. And we're planning a big event on that property next spring. These other 5 people that were there represented several different entities, and we're planning a big event. Details and date will be coming, in the future. But just we got a lot done this week. I'll put it that way. And in 3 days in Ohio, we covered some ground, and we probably filmed 30 videos, Steve and I. So lots of material going to be coming from that trip.
So, not to take away from the videos on the Whitetail Master Academy, if you could pick one thing that blew your mind or that just surprised you the most about apples, put you on the spot, what was one thing that just you had it completely wrong, or you never would have guessed, or just give us a nugget of something that really surprised you?
Oh, I think it's what to look for in an apple. If you're selecting an apple for wildlife like we do. And the other thing that really surprised me, this older gentleman that had the orchard for forever, I learned that he sprays his orchard 12 times a year,
Wow.
to get his apple crop. That's a lot of spray, in an orchard setting.
Right.
And these trees that Andy, the breeder, has developed don't need sprayed at all. And the genetic, how it all came together is just really interesting. He bought a property that was an old abandoned apple orchard. For 15 years, nothing had been done to it. And by the time he got it, only about 20% of those trees were still producing apples. Disease had taken out 80%. So he took those 20%, collected apples, and basically for the seed from all those trees still producing, and he planted thousands and thousands and thousands of these seeds in beds. And then he would select, I mean, he might have 5, 10,000 apple seedlings growing, and he selected only, at the end of a growing season, he selected only about 10 from those thousands, and then he would propagate them, and he would do that, each year. And the ones that he was selecting were for vigor, fast growth, but also for disease resistance. So most, just about all apple diseases have to do with the leaf. The where apples, well, you might remember the video that I did for YouTube on native plants, and
Right.
We got all these all native habitat enthusiasts that they promote only native stuff. Well, apples aren't native to this country. They're native of Kazakhstan or someplace like that, where the climate is a lot drier, and the humidity that we have in the Midwest is not conducive for apples, and that's what causes all these apple diseases with the leaf.
Interesting.
Yeah. Well, Andy, through his years of selection, has got these apple trees that will withstand our climate in the Midwest, hold their leaves, and produce a fantastic crop of apples with absolutely no spray or no inputs from man.
It's like Dr. Strickland and yours idea of culling bucks, except in the tree side. That's taking that all to a new level.
That's exactly right. And this lady from the geneticist, she's done testing on these apple trees and found that they have actually 3 layers of genes, 3 separate genes for disease resistance. So they are super resistant to diseases. And this lady, she went to Kazakhstan or wherever apples originate. I think I'm saying that country right. She spent 18 months there on a research project, basically on apple diseases. And then when she meets Andy, this breeder. She just dropped that project. She spent 18 months out of the country, and I don't know how many years before that and after that, on this project for Ohio State University, and she drops it all once she comes across Andy and his trees. And then the guy that the 200-year 6th generation apple orchard guy, he when he first seen Andy's trees, he just amazed. And he says those are the healthiest apple trees that he's ever run across in his life. He said way healthier than the ones he grows in his orchard, but the ones he grows in his orchard produce a nice, pretty apple. The kind that you would put in a grocery store, and
Right.
they have a longer shelf life too. That's the two things when they grow them for grocery stores. They've got to have an eye appeal. They got to be a really pretty apple, and then they've got to have shelf life, so they'll remain good on the grocery shelf. And with wildlife, we don't care what they look like. We want
Right.
disease resistance.
Sure.
And I tasted more different apples that day. I mean, we would walk around from tree to tree and grab an apple off one, and I've got my favorite. I'll tell you that. There's one that he calls Steady Eddie, and that is the eating apple. If you want to eat one, that's the one. So I'm going to have a few of them planted on my farm next year. But this video, Steve produced a video, and I think it's 42 minutes long. I watched it today. Every time he produces a video before it gets released, he sends it to me for approval. And I watched that Apple video today, and it's like 42 minutes of information that we gleaned that day. And I'm telling you, I know twice as much about apples now that I did the last podcast we did a week ago.
So I got just a couple questions for you. The first one is running through everybody's mind. If Jay Gingrich, as people start learning more about these apples and the disease resistant that they see, if Jay's going to be carrying these apples, is that going to be something that starts immediately, or is he waiting for that to be upticked? I mean, are these things going to start being able to be sold?
Yeah, he's going to have them available next spring. Now, not all varieties. I think they're going to have 2 or 3 available next spring. There'll be a limited amount, but he'll have a couple thousand or so. And I mean, it's the real deal. I mean, I seen these trees firsthand. I ate the apples off of them. I seen them without any spray ever being on them.
Well, but I mean, that's the whole premise behind falling in line with what we want to do is we want to plant diverse food on our property, but the last thing we want to do is be in there 8, 12 times a year. Now, granted, a food plotters, you don't spray your trees, but they're not as healthy as what something like this that's genetically raised to be in that condition. And we've talked about it so long. Now, did they talk about apples for wildlife being able to come ripe later in the year versus early in the year? Is that also part of all of this?
Oh, absolutely. They selected, or Andy selected for bloom date. They want an apple that's going to bloom later in the spring, so the chance of it getting hit by a freeze or a frost is less. And they also selected for apples in November. And Andy says if it's not going to hold apples in November, what good is it for a deer hunter?
It's like soybeans in late season, right?
Absolutely. And Andy's a deer hunter. He shot some big bucks, so he knows when we want them. Now he's going to have some that are going to be ripe late or earlier to lengthen that window. But I'll tell you what, these apple trees are the real deal.
Well, I got a feeling after this podcast, Jay Gringrich's phone's going to blow up with a waiting list wanting to get some of these trees because the information that you're going to put on the Whitetail Master Academy and the access to this, I mean, that's a game changer for someone who's getting ready to plant apple trees to be able to have late apples with no maintenance. I mean, I don't know how much better you can get than that.
Well, and I'll warn everybody that we filmed some videos on these specific varieties that Jay's going to be selling. So like the Steady Eddie that I just mentioned, we filmed a video about Steady Eddie. We're showing the apples and what the tree looks like and all that, and then what makes it different than the other varieties. But they're not on Jay's website yet. I would say within 2 months. I mean, he's got a new website being built right now, so give it a couple months and those trees will be on there. I'm sure when they're on there, Jay's going to let us know so we can let everybody know, but everybody doesn't need to run to Jay's website right now because you're not going to see these apples. This is a brand new project. But
I can see it now. I'm going to get a text message from Jay and says, stop talking about it.
Yeah. Well, I made a post about it, and I'm not sure if he got many calls from that or not on my social media a couple days ago. But I'll tell you what. Now, when I see my own apple trees that I've had on the farm for a while, I can see some that have some fairly good disease resistance, and I can see some that are just waiting to die. The other thing that's really great about these trees is Andy says, first of all, they're going to be huge trees. They're not going to be little dinky apple trees. He's using the best root stock to graft these trees on. So they're going to be big trees. And he says they will live for 100 years. So
Wow.
way past a lifetime. It's not like a 30-year tree or something. These trees will be there long after you die. Your kids and grandkids will be eating apples off these trees.
Kind of takes the Tractor Supply Ziploc bag tree that they have by the cash register to a different level, doesn't it?
Well, and that's another topic we covered. I was comparing these trees or asking these guys to compare these trees to one you might get at Walmart or one of the farm supply stores or whatever. And they said, well, you know what those trees are? They said, when these nurseries that grow these apple trees by the thousands, tens of thousands, those discount places, they're buying the junk. They're getting the cheapest trees that they can possibly get,
All the
and that's where
bucks.
that's where all the cull trees go, is to those places, and they're not going to be as healthy. The branching structure is not going to be as good, and the longevity of them is going to be terrible. Because the specific question that I asked both these guys, and it's in the video, is if I planted 3 of your trees and then I went down to Walmart and I got 3 of the best looking apple trees they had and I planted them today, in 10 years, what's going to be the difference? And they both said in 10 years, the 3 you bought at Walmart are all going to be dead.
Really?
So, yeah.
Wow.
And the ones um, that I would get from these guys or from Jay, they said they'll be 30 feet tall and producing 20 bushels of apple each year after year after year.
Well, we'll make a mental note that when Jay is available to start selling these, he knows how many they are, what the price is going to be, and when they're able to be ordered, we'll make the announcement on the podcast to kind of alleviate some questions that he has. So, teeing it up now, but we'll make sure we announce to everybody when they're ready to go on this thing.
Yeah, we probably just ought to get Jay on here when it's time.
Yeah.
These trees will be able to be shipped. Let everybody know they're going to be bare root trees that can be shipped anywhere in the country, I guess. So,
But it sounds like a lot of people, as they're sitting around maybe on Saturday evening or Sunday afternoon, got a lot of new material to watch on the Whitetail Master Academy with as much video as you guys got done this week.
yeah, we filmed several, and like I said, we just released one I think today on the Apple project. So check it out, Whitetail Master Academy.
All right, good deal. All right, well, let's move on to the Osseo spot. I mentioned that something new was going to be happening with Osseo, and we were talking with Joe Miles and the Chasing Giants family. He's just he's gotten involved and kind of knows all of us so well, and he appreciates the community that comes together under Chasing Giants so much, how we try to work for charity and the good, and he's just so appreciative of it and all the people that tag him in the photos. And we had this idea that as hunting season starts, if you're an Osseo customer, tag Osseo and Don and I in the photo. And what Osseo is going to do is every week they're going to look at all these photos that people have. It could be somebody shot a spike, a doe, the biggest buck of their life, and Osseo is going to pick one every week, and they're going to contact you and make sure it's okay and get permission. But Osseo is then going to feature your photo on the Chasing Giants podcast. So right now we're getting ready to transition to the Osseo spot. But before we do, we're going to show the first one. And this gentleman's name is Freeman Miller from down southwest of Nashville, Tennessee. And he was out in Colorado this last week and shot a really good bull. So I thought it was pretty cool. We talk about Osseo being whitetail hunters only, but you got Freeman up there with his family wearing Osseo gear hiking the mountains of Colorado, and he shot a really good bull with his Matthews V3. So congratulations to Freeman. And make sure if you want your photo featured on the Chasing Giants podcast Osseo spot, to make sure you tag Osseo in their photo, and they'll get with you and get permission to use it on the Chasing Giants podcast. They're going to do this every week for us. So Don and I don't pick the photo. Osseo does. They're going to send them to us every week. But make sure you tag them in your photos as you're out through hunting season. So with that, let's listen to this spot, and we'll be right back with some more updates before we go to questions.
Osseo Gear has perfected one of the most innovative camo patterns on the market. The unique camo pattern designed to mimic the feather patterns of one of North America's greatest predators, the great horned owl. Combined with intuitive features, superior comfort, and ultra high quality fabrics give bow hunters the ultimate advantage. Osseo has outfitted over 10,000 bow hunters across the country with over 1,000 5-star reviews. Visit asiogear.com to check it out for yourself. Use code CHASINGGIANTS for 15% off.
All right. Well, thanks to Joe Miles. He said that, Don, he told me he's only hunted 3 sits all year. And I said, how many bucks did you kill, Joe? And he goes, only one.
Yeah. He's really slacking, isn't he?
That's Joe Miles. He's been hunting 3 times and only shot 1 buck. So he's at a different level, Don. He is a killing machine.
He's slacking big time. So, well, what's been up with you this week, Terry? You seemed down in the dumps when I called you earlier.
I've had the most mentally exhausting week I've had, I think, in my entire life. I did not hunt. I didn't do much. After 28 years of employment at my company, I officially resigned early this week, to pursue another opportunity. I've accepted another job in a leadership role with another company. And I'm telling you what, after 28 years, it was really heavy to kind of separate and announce that I was going to do something different, because those people are family. I mean, some of them are my parents' age, some of them are your age, some of them are a lot younger than me. And, you spend that much time with people for that long, and it's really hard to accept the fact you're moving on to something else. So a lot of things have been heavy on me in the last year. And, at the end of the day, family's got to come first. And there is a lot of decisions that kind of played into this. And I don't know, it might be a good topic for Chasing Giants TV one day for me to explain everything that went into this and why I made the decision, and, trying to keep a perspective of faith, family, and what's important above all. And, that's your career too. But, here in the coming weeks, I'll announce where I'm going and what I'm doing. So I got to do some transition plans with my current employer before I leave, and make sure some things are in line. I want to go out. I don't want to leave and burn any bridges by any means. I want to make sure we take care of stuff there. But yeah, starting a new venture after 28 years. I don't think it's very common for my age and younger to work in the same place very long. I know your age was very common for people to work 20, 30 years in the same location, but the younger generations bounce around a lot. And but it's the first time I've ever even thought about leaving since I was 18 years old, when I started working for the company I'm with now.
I was going to say, I thought you work there in high school painting the warehouse floor or something?
So it was after high school, but before I started college, as a summer job. They hired a bunch of kids to come in. You had to be 18 to work there. And it wasn't while I was in high school. It was after I graduated, but before I went to college. It was just summer help, and we painted the yellow safety lines, where your forklifts are allowed to go, but across the line is where the forklifts can't. We had to scrape all those the old yellow paint up and then retape it in about a 600,000 square foot facility. That was my first job there when I was 18. So it's been a long time with a lot of different roles in the company, but I've been very blessed to have a very successful career. But I'm 100% confident that this is a door that God has opened for myself and my wife and the family, that we're just so excited. It's going to present so many opportunities um, to continue ministering with Lester's Feet. The ownership team at this company is actually very big supporters of Lester's Feet. So they believe in it and they want to continue to help grow it. So it's just a lot of things coming together that I think is going to be such a blessing to not only my family, but a lot of others.
Well, I have no doubt you'll do great at it. And I'm sure the people at your old job are going to miss you and you're going to miss them. I went through a similar situation with a job. I'd been at it 20 years. So I kind of know what you're going through. You'll miss the people and the people will miss you, but got to move forward.
Make no mistake. It doesn't matter what job you have. When you leave, somebody's going to fill your spot. And just remember that you got to take care of your family. And I think that's one of the most pivotal things. I'm 46 years old. And I told you earlier, I said, I had to admit that when I was younger, I think I was an okay dad. I was very active with my kid, but I wasn't a very good husband. It was either I was with my kids or I was working and trying to work on my career. And in the corporate world, that's a lot of investment, as you continue to grow in management and that paycheck keeps getting bigger, there's a sacrifice that comes with that. And that's usually time. And I really always focused with my kids, but I wasn't the husband that I needed to be. And this is really going to allow me to check both boxes. It's a huge promotion. The role that I'm going to be accepting is a huge promotion for my career, but it's also going to allow me to check some of those boxes to be the husband that I need to be to my wife, especially as my kids are getting ready to be done with high school and move out to college. So that's really, really important to me. So I can't say much more than that, but we'll keep everybody posted. I think there's going to be a little bit of overlap, with podcast topics and food plotting and different things like that as we move forward with what my new job is. But I think you and Dwayne have talked about I need to go work for Real World full time, but I don't think that's on the cards. But I think there will be a lot of overlap where a lot of our interests will be kind of complementary to each other.
Well, I'm always here to support you in any way I can.
I appreciate it. So we got 5 good questions tonight. I want to spend some time on that. But before we do, you got just a little over a week before hunting season starts. Are you ready, or is there some last minute things that you need to get done before October 1st rolls around?
Well, to be honest, Terry, my grandsons are going to be hunting the youth season, and the youth season, I think it's the first weekend in October. I think it's like the 6th, 7th, and 8th or something like that.
Yep.
I'm probably not going to hunt until they have a chance to get first crack at what's here. And if they don't, well, they're most likely they're going to get to shoot a buck.
Right.
And then once they've had their crack at it, then I'll see what's left and I'll make a plan from there. So I have never ever set out the first 5 or 6 days of season in my life. But with all what's going on with them boys and their mom and their dad and everything, I mean, they've been under a lot of stress, and I want them to have the hunt of their life. So,
well, there's another little story playing out. We kind of teased this up that we're going to be partnering this year, and this we didn't plan this. I wish that both of us were smart enough that we're partnering with Brenton Firearms. Both of us are going to be using one of their, hunting AR platforms in 350 Legend. So your grandsons are actually going to be hunting with one of these new Brenton rifles. I have one here that I'm going to be doing a lot of testing with different loads, with suppression, because I can use that here in Kentucky. But the cool story is that our new sponsor and partner to the show, is going to play a pretty cool role with your grandsons being able to hunt this year. And I think they already have the rifle there in Indiana and have been getting it sighted in and practiced. We got you decided to go with a holographic sight from Vortex on it, because the shots are going to be pretty close because they're going to be hunting in the spots that are kind of set up for bow season. So putting a big Canon scope on there probably didn't make sense.
Well, Corey has got the gun sighted in, and both boys have been shooting it, and he sent me pictures of them shooting it, and that's what they're going to be using during that youth season. So I'm kind of anxious to see what steps out in front of them.
So how are you going to do it with both boys? Do you know yet? Are you taking one and Corey's taking the other, or are you trying? I mean, those 7 foot 360s are probably big enough that all 4 of you could get in.
Yeah, they are, but I think we're going to I'll take one, Corey will take one. Steve Shields is going to be here to video these hunts, and we'll just trade off, whichever grandson I take the first hunt, I'll switch off and take the other one the second, and
right,
just keep rotating through the weekend.
Well, with you having a second, your video camera, you could have a video camera in both of them, so you try to get that memory of whatever. But man, how cool would it be if you doubled up both of your grandsons on one night or just over the weekend? I don't want to make it sound like there's pressure on they got to shoot something, but I just got a feeling that even if nothing's shot, the time that you're spending and dedicating your farm and kind of putting your hit list and wishes personally aside for what's important as this family situation is being navigated. I hope people take notice of that, of what's important this year. And that's not putting another buck on your trophy wall.
Right. There's a good chance that one of those boys is going to kill Babe. There's a real good chance. He's been daylighting pretty regular by the smoky blind. So I would not be a bit surprised if one of those boys does not shoot Babe, and I hope they do.
Well, I can tell you that everywhere that you can see out of that smoky blind is going to be well in range of that Brenton 350 Legend. So it doesn't matter where they're at, where he comes out at. They are well within the wheelhouse of that rifle. So I'm excited to see how that is. So we'll keep everybody posted and how that goes. But let's move on to the first question of the week and get that going and try to get through these before we get too late.
Okay, the first one comes from Mike Russell from Woodsfield, Ohio. He says, Don, I often hear you talk about dry spring, summer months causing bucks to not add many inches and or antler growth. Can you explain what rain drought has to do with antler growth? Yeah, Mike, what it has to do with is, the lack of moisture affects plant growth. And, for example, my soybeans this year just totally stalled out. We had a really dry May and June, and those soybean plants stalled out, and they didn't have that tender young growth, on the end of the plant. And it's the same way with weeds and everything else that a deer eats on, that when it's extremely dry, you just don't have that much of that tender growth. And that tender growth, the new growth coming out of the top of the plant, that's really nutrient dense. The nutrients are really concentrated there, and the deer prefer it. The deer know it. That's what they're going to eat. If you go out in the soybean field and look, you don't ever see browse on the bottom of the soybean plants. They don't eat them bottom leaves. They're eating them top leaves, and it's the same thing they do with every plant. So when it's extremely dry, that tender top growth just is not there for them to eat. So they don't get the nutrients they would in a wetter spring and summer. So that does affect antler growth, and we see it this year across much of the Midwest.
One of the things that I've noticed, and tell me if I'm wrong, but we hunt a lot of September here in Kentucky, and usually that fourth cutting alfalfa is happening somewhere around end of September, early October. This year it's all messed up because of the drought. A lot of people didn't even get a third cutting. But in normal years, I've always had alfalfa and soybeans. And when they go in and mow that alfalfa in September, whether it's third or fourth cutting, you better believe that every deer is going to those soybeans. But as soon as it gets rain and you get that regrowth of that alfalfa, and it's that first, young tender growth that comes back after they bale alfalfa, they'll walk through soybeans to get to it. They want that first growth. And I think back in the day, I think you guys did maybe you and Dwayne did some studies, and I think maybe like third cutting, fourth cutting alfalfa is some of the highest, nutrient from a tissue analysis I believe that there is in the legume family.
Right. Yeah. And each successive cutting of alfalfa, it just becomes more nutrient dense. The dairy farmers, they want to feed the third, fourth cuttings. Sometimes in some regions of the country, you might even get 5 or 6 cuttings. And it's those later cuttings. You don't get near the yield. You're not going to get the tonnage per acre with
Right.
those later cuttings, but the nutrient density is so much greater on those later cuttings. And the deer know it. I mean, and they hammer it.
Yeah, it's really interesting. If you're like they bailed today on my place. So for the next 2 days, you got to be on those soybeans because that's where everything's going to be at. There's nothing in the field where they've just raked it, picked it up, and baled it. But as soon as we get rain and those first stems, I'm serious. They'll walk right through soybeans, clover, Dixie dozen, whatever. That first sprout back of alfalfa in the fall is about as good as it gets.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, great question. Thank you for submitting. Here's the second one.
This one comes from Jordan Brandenburg from Sullivan, Illinois. He says, Don and Terry, we have heard you talk about human intrusion until you're blue in the face. We have also heard you speak about taking trucks, ATVs into the woods running with music playing full blast without it hurting anything. Now, with this drought we've been in, our food plots are not growing worth a crap. Would taking a water tank into the food plot with an ATV or truck and dumping it in the field be good, or would it put too much pressure on the woods? Also, the men's retreat was wonderful. You and the church put on a wonderful get together. I look forward to going for years to come. Thanks, Jordan. Jordan, appreciate you coming to that event. And it's definitely an annual thing. And they're already asking me to bring in some hunting celebrities in future years. So you'll probably get to see Terry Peer there one day. But regarding your question about the water in your food plots, when we talk about human intrusion, we're particularly talking about the bedding cover. Food plots are out in the open. That's not a place that the deer are going to be. And as you noted, I've told stories about going in and putting up stands with my truck, leaving the truck running, making it loud. If those deer, even mature bucks, if they can hear where you are, it's not near as stressful on them because they can decide how they want to react. Do they want to lay tight? They want to run, whatever. As long as they know where you're at, they can make those decisions. It's when you slip up on them quietly and spook them from their bed, that's when it's a real issue. And the pressure out on the food plots is not that big a deal, especially if you're doing it in the middle of the day and you're in a vehicle, ATV or whatever, and they hear it. The concern I have with your question is the amount of water that you're going to have to put on a plot for it to make any kind of difference at all is way beyond what you can even imagine. I mean, it's going to take thousands and thousands of gallons. If you just had a 1 acre plot, you're talking several thousand gallons to equal an inch of rain. I heard the figure at one time, and I forget what it is now, but it was some crazy figure for an inch of rain on an acre of ground is tens of thousands of gallons. And for you to do that, I mean, it's just, we're talking probably days and days with major water tanks to get that done. So I think just sprinkling some water on top of the ground is going to do minimal have minimal benefit for you. So, I don't think that the results are going to be worth the effort. And let's just forget about the human intrusion factor. Just the results you're going to get from your food plot by doing this are going to be so minimal that I don't think it's worth it.
I think Jordan makes a great question, and it's a perfect example of how literal some people take some of the comments that you make. And I just want to make sure everybody listening is on the same page. And I might be reading into Jordan's question just a little bit, but just a couple key points. Number one, when Don talks about taking a truck in and rolling down the windows and hanging a stand, that's one time that he's doing that. It's not repetitive over and over and over. The second thing is where he's talked about doing that is on a field edge, not back in the bedding cover. The truck's sitting in the middle of a picked cornfield or a picked bean field, and he's right on the edge putting a stand. We visit a stand site at the master class that this story happened at. So I think people sometimes take it a little bit too literally, that say they're going to drive through, the back part of their farm with the windows down, their truck and the radio up every week, and play the radio loud, and they're not putting intrusion on. So I think people just take it sometimes a little bit too literal. And I don't know if Jordan does or not, or if he's just asking a question to make a point. But in the event that you do have to go in and make a change, if there's a chance you could bump a deer, what I think this story and what you've said is, don't get into a position where you're trying to be super sneaky and step on a mature buck, because that's going to make a whole lot more harm than letting him know you're coming miles away with that radio up. Do your deed, leave the truck running. They know you're there, but you get out and it's not as big of a deal. But it's not like you're doing it 3-4 times a year in the same spot. I think that's not quite what you're trying to imply with that idea.
And it's actually something I've probably done about twice in my life, and I only remember one of them. So, in the right situation, when where there's a mature buck and you need to get some stands ready, absolutely, that's the way to go about it. If you don't have it done when seasons opens, but it's not something I've done very often, but I have had it work.
Our buddy Kyle Harmon at Team Radical had a situation, I believe last year, the year before, where they needed to go in and put a stand, and they picked a specific time during the middle of the day based on trail camera data that they knew the buck wasn't there. It was well before it, and they went in with a truck just like you talked about and put the tree in, and Kyle stayed and the truck drove off. And Kyle just went in for a long set and he killed the deer that night. Now, if he would have gone in there and tried to pack in super quiet, you never know. The deer could have been bedded right there very close and boogered out. But because they used the truck to go in, left the truck running, hang the set, Kyle stayed behind. He had a little bit longer set, I believe, but he ended up killing the deer that night. That I guarantee that buck knew that truck was there, but it left and he felt safe and he got up. But people don't think that you can every week drive your truck through your sanctuary with your radio on loud and you're not doing any harm. That's not what we're saying here.
Yep.
Do you want to take your deer hunting success to the next level? Do you want to take your hunting property to the ultimate level? Don Higgins Whitetail Master Academy is a one-of-a-kind source of cutting-edge information to help whitetail hunters and land managers become more successful.
This one comes from Nick Collins from Bay City, Michigan. It says, "Hey there, gentlemen. I thoroughly enjoy listening to your podcast and appreciate your willingness to share your wealth of knowledge. My question is aimed towards Terry, and I completely expect this to be difficult for him to answer, so maybe a day or two to think about this is warranted. Terry, I know Don has taught you many, many life lessons. However, what are the top 3 lessons, or simply put, hunting-related things that you have learned from Don, if any? Is there anything that you just fundamentally didn't understand until deeper conversations took place? Thank you for your time, and I pray God watches closely over the entire Real World family, Nick. Well, Nick, I picked your question because you asked Terry the question, and I like when people ask Terry the questions.
Yeah, but
I
he
think we
said I
need to
should
hear
have
from
3
Terry.
days notice. This is the first time I'm reading it or hearing it.
Yeah, I left that part out.
People don't
You- what-
understand that you pick the questions. I don't know them until we do it on air.
You did get to see it about, what, 30 minutes before we got on?
Yeah, but I didn't even read the question. I just copied and pasted it on the slide. I don't pay any attention to them.
Well, you can do the best you can. You can
it's-
just say you didn't learn anything, and just we can move
It's a-
on to the next one.
It's actually not a hard question at all. I can probably even answer 4, but we'll see how it goes. So the game changer for me was when Don drew out on a piece of paper. And the first time I think I saw you do this was at a hunting show at a restaurant with our buddies Dave Barrett and Johnny Pace. And you drew actually on a napkin what a buck's doing when he J hooks into a bedding area with the wind quartering in his nose. And that was the first time I'd ever kind of seen you draw it out. And my goodness, I don't even know how long ago this was. But so I guess the first one would be when it finally clicked what you were saying with how mature bucks use bedding differently than any other deer in the deer herd. And I remember you being on one of my permission properties at that I hunt in Illinois, and we were walking around, and I was so excited about a couple stands, and you just kept being quiet and didn't say anything. And you got to the last spot, which is my favorite spot. And as soon as you got there, you said, "This is it. This is it. You'll kill a giant right here." But you also said I'd kill a giant with a different wind than what I thought I would kill a different wind. And you sat there and explained it for about 5 minutes as we were standing in the woods. So that would be the first one. The second one is it relates to a different approach as far as herd management and killing bucks. We talked about that a lot. And I think you've even changed this idea a little bit in your mind over the years too. But from a fundamental standpoint, you've been doing it for 30 years on your farm. Maybe a few small tweaks to it here and there. The third one would be the kind of the structure or layout of food plots and bedding, and how to create transition between the two or funnels between the two where you can hunt with no intrusion. So, we want to pick a deer between bedding and food, but it has to be in a place where we can hunt it without intrusion. So how they use the wind. What did I say was the second one? Did I already forget it?
I forget it.
Yeah, I think I just named 3. I think the other thing that I get from Don that's not hunting related is Don, believe it or not, this is one of the biggest differences between Don and I. Don always looks for the good in people and trusts people. And I'm always pessimistic, trying to figure out how somebody's going to screw me or Don over or take advantage of Don, and trying to protect him of that. And he's got like the heart of gold and trust everybody. And I try to talk him out of trusting everybody. So the balance of us two, neither one of us are right. I'm too pessimistic and he's too trusting. So we kind of equal each other out and make a good combo when it comes to that.
That is absolutely true. I trust everybody, and that's why it bothers me so much whenever the haters on social media or whatever. It's like I try to be nice to everybody, and of course I fly off the handle pretty easy sometimes when. But
I think
yeah,
I think
that's a
I'm
good
more
point.
tactful when I get upset than you are.
Oh, there's no doubt about that.
But you are definitely way too trusting, and I don't know. I think as we've gotten to be friends and kind of business partners and have different things together, I feel like my role sometimes is to say, "Hey, think about this a little bit before you do it."
That is absolutely true.
So, yeah.
So
I
you
hope
didn't
that
even need
answers
2 days. You didn't need 2 or 3 days. You all you needed was 2 minutes.
It's the whole the funny thing about this is we talk about like 4 different topics on this podcast every single episode. It's just different illustrations. It's hilarious. It's hunting mature bucks is so different, and when you finally let it click, I'm not going to say it's easy, but it makes such a big difference. We say it a lot. You hunt less, but you see so many more deer. And I'm when people get into it at this level, it's very common for people to enjoy the habitat stuff and the strategic game even more than they do the hunting side of it. I hear it almost every single time I talk to a land consulting client of yours or mine or Wes's. It's when you get to that point where you're really trying to focus and strategize for mature bucks, you kind of almost have to like the habitat a little bit better than the hunting. Ray and Aiden and I sat around a campfire up in northern Ohio, and we're talking about the exact same thing. I mean, these guys talk to us all the time about different projects they're doing on their farm. They just love the habitat stuff just as much as hunting.
Yep, absolutely. And you know what, Terry? We forgot to mention something earlier.
Uh-oh.
We forgot to mention the Quiet Cat bike special offer for our consulting clients.
Oh, there you go. Great segue right now. We can take a quick break and talk about that.
Yeah, so any of our consulting clients, it doesn't matter if you had me, Terry, Wes, or who, Bobby or Mark Luster, or if you attended the Whitetail Master Class at my farm, and it doesn't matter what year you attended, any of our past clients, Quiet Cat has a special offer of 40% off, and I've never seen them offer that much of a discount on the bike. And it's a couple of models. It's not every bike. There's a couple of models, 40% off. So if you fit one of those categories as either a consulting client or a master class student, get a hold of me, send me an email or a text, and ask for that discount code for Quiet Cat, and you get 40% off. I mean, you're never going to get a better deal on a Quiet Cat bike.
Yeah, and so we don't know how long this is going to last. So make sure you reach out to us. Again, masterclass students or land consulting clients for anybody under Higgins Outdoors. If you're considering that Quiet Cat, reach out to us. It's only available for those people. Quiet Cat's doing a real special promotion for all the people that are under those umbrellas.
Also, the Whitetail Master Academy students,
members,
they can get it too. Or members.
Subscriber to the Whitetail Master Academy.
Yep.
All right.
So if you're not a subscriber and you want a bike, go subscribe, and there you get your 40% off. You paid for your subscription.
Yeah, several times over. 40% off on a bike more than pays for Master Academy membership. But yeah, so this is not something that we can publish. It's not something that we put in an email. You have to contact us via social media or email to get this information. So that's the only way you can get it, and it's going to be a limited time only based on how many models are left and how many fly off the shelves. So make sure you reach out to Don on it, okay? All right.
This one comes from Jake Johnson from Decatur, Indiana. It says, Don and Terry, love listening to the podcast every weekend with my friends. We have created a drinking game while listening to you guys. Every time Terry says the words tee up or perspective, the group takes a drink, and we normally have more than we should.
Do I say perspective that much?
I have never noticed it. You do say tee up, but I don't.
That's an interesting perspective that someone would recognize the word perspective through a perspective of listening only on a perspective platform. So perspective is just an interesting word. So I hope they get through the rest of the podcast and not pass out, because that would be a different perspective.
I was going to say, you just got them guys drunk on about 3 sentences.
I'm just teeing up the next game for them.
There you go again. You're going to have to let them catch their breath here in a second. He says, in all seriousness, love what you guys do. And Dawn, prayers for your daughter on a fast and easy recovery. My question is, I just bought a 46-acre farm in southern Ohio in a county known for huge deer. There are 2 large outfitters within 1.5 miles of me that own thousands of acres. Is this a good thing or a bad thing? I know they are using good management strategies so clients can kill bucks, but they are also harvesting multiple big bucks every year. Also, what can I do to help set my property apart from those farms to help draw deer away from them and over to my property? Love y'all and God bless. Well, Jake, you are asking for a lot. So you got 2 guys on either side of you that own thousands of acres, and you got 46 acres. You are about 1.5 miles from these guys, and you want to set your property apart. So I'm going to say that those guys at 1.5 miles away, even though they own thousands of acres, are probably having minimal impact on your property. And for you to be able to manipulate a 46-acre property to draw bucks 1.5 miles away, I think is not going to happen. It's just not. And if you was in open farm country like where I live, it would be very difficult to do here. I think once a buck has got his home range determined, you just can't pull them very far at all out of that home range. Maybe a little bit, maybe a property over or something, but you just can't pull them 1.5 miles. So I think it's just going to be impossible to do that. And one of the reasons that I select your question is I think that sometimes we don't realize the limitations of our properties. And, every property has got a ceiling. And the smaller the property, the lower the ceiling. 46 acres is not a big property. You're not going to hold deer or hold mature bucks there every day for daylight hours. Now, your goal should be to try to keep them there as many daylight hours as possible. But, 46 acres, you're just not going to do it. And human intrusion, we talk about, that's one of them topics, Terry, that we talk about every single week. Human intrusion. We've already talked about it at least once, if not twice on this podcast. But the smaller the property, the more critical human intrusion is. And 46 acres is small. And Terry, I'm going to tee it up so we can hear your perspective on this.
Well, I mean, 46 acres is just a small property that the perspective of it, just you could turn it into a driving range where you just tee up golf balls one after another, teed up, teed up, teed up, teed up. You could maybe put a 9-hole golf course on it where you teed up 9 different times. But the change of perspective of having to play that twice for 18 holes wouldn't tee up for a very good round. So probably 18 holes of teeing up would be the best perspective. And I cannot believe that people play drinking games to this. I've heard it all now.
Them guys are stumbling drunk right now. Their wives are probably going to.
I'm paranoid. I know I say a lot, but
no, that's me. I say
paranoid about saying perspective.
Their wives are not going to allow them to listen to Chasing Giants any longer, because every time they do, they get drunk. And this week they're going to be just they may have alcohol poisoning actually if they keep it up.
Well, maybe they're just drinking Dr. Pepper then. Maybe that's all they're doing. So they'll just have diabetes instead. All right,
that's a different perspective.
Let's tee up the last question for you, Don, and see what your perspective of this is.
This one comes from Jason Clark from Baxter Springs, Kansas. he says, "Hey, Don and Terry, I'm wondering why you guys say to not hunt mornings in October. What's the difference between October and November besides weather and the rut? Is it because deer move so much at night in the heat of October? Thanks for your podcast, and I listen to every episode, and I love it. Heard you guys talk about this subject, but hoping you'll go into more detail as of why." Well, Jason, you answered your own question. What's different between October and November except the rut and the weather? The rut's the big one. When those deer are on a feeding pattern like they are early and late, before and after the rut, most of the time, a mature buck is going to be back in his bed or close to his bed before the sun comes up. And your odds of getting a shot at that buck under such conditions is very minimal. And there's a lot better chance that you're going to spook that buck coming into a morning stand than an afternoon stand. He's on his feet. He may be out in an open field as you're walking across the open field and detect you that way. When you come in on an afternoon hunt, that buck's stationary. He's laying in his bed, and it's just a whole lot easier for you to get in there. And another big drawback on the morning hunts is even if you get there way before daylight. Terry talked earlier about bucks J-hooking into their beds in the morning, and they do that a lot. They don't just waltz into their bed. They run the downwind edge of that, of where they plan to bed, and scent check it a lot of times, especially the more pressure that these deer got. If you're hunting public land, for example, or private land where there's a lot of hunters, those bucks take less chances. They are almost always going to run the downwind edge of wherever it is they're going to bed and hook back into it after they've scent checked it. And it doesn't matter if you get there at 3 in the morning, 3 hours before daylight and beat those bucks to the spot, they're still going to wind you before they come in. And a lot of times they're going to do that in the dark, and you're not even going to know you've been winded. I would love to know how many bucks have detected me that I had no idea were anywhere around on hunts over the years, and especially morning hunts. Back when I used to hunt October mornings a lot. Now, with that said, I do think, and I've changed my mind on this some in just the last couple of years. I think when you get to the second half of October, especially the last week or 10 days, and you get a cold front during that time, I think that's an opportunity to kill a buck on an October morning. But without that cold front, most of the time those bucks are going to be back in their bed, especially if you got temperatures that are a little bit above normal. Then they're almost definitely going to be back in their bed before daylight. So that's that's why I don't hunt October mornings very often, especially the first 20 days or so of the season. And Terry, I bet you got a perspective on that. I'd like to tee it up for you to hear what you had to say.
I think your perspective is spot on. If I was going to tee up anything, it would just be for you to close out the show, because these guys are trashed by now.
Well, I hope they leave a comment on YouTube.
I bet Ray and Aiden are giggling so much right now.
Well, Ray and Aiden, they've got a little bit different perspective on things because, we've teed it up with them a time or two.
Goodness gracious. So, well, I can tell you what I'm going to tee up this week, and that is hunting over the soybeans this weekend because that alfalfa got mowed and baled. So no rain in the forecast. We did get a little rain on top of my fall plots last week, so I was excited about that. But my nephew, we're recording on Friday night. My nephew, who is a minister and just graduated from seminary, is getting married tomorrow. And we're going to celebrate with him a little bit tomorrow. And then Gonna try to do a little bit of hunting over about the next 6 days. I think we got some good weather, a little bit cooler temperatures, and mowed alfalfa, and gonna be hammering the beans and the clover right now. So that's my strategy the next couple days.
I'm just going to get some work done around the farm. I can't believe I've got to wait 5 days or 6 days to hunt, but once season opens. But I'm gladly going to do it. I've got to take on October 2nd, which is Monday. I'm taking my daughter for her second chemo treatment, and appreciate everyone that's reached out. To this day, I'm still getting multiple people every day reaching out. And guys, I can't tell you how much I appreciate your prayers. Please keep them coming. She's got a long road ahead of her, but she's handling it with way more grace than I ever would have. But it's in God's hands, and we trust in Him.
Before we get off here, I also want to plug something, and it's not for selfishness, but we have done 3 different weekends of Sunday night prayer time on Chasing Giants TV YouTube channel. And Wes Delks, and then Devin Hurley, and then Wes from Fall Line Ridge they've all done just a phenomenal job. And I love it. I would love it if all the listeners would go check this out, especially if you just want a little bit of encouragement before you start the week, because YouTube, anything religious, I don't care what the internet says, I've proven with these things that YouTube is suppressing these things a little bit, because it's a faith-based thing that right in the title says prayer, and you have to go to that Chasing Giants TV YouTube channel. And this week, our buddy Ty Miller from the Small Acre Hunting Podcast, we've known Ty and his dad for a long time, met them. They're just super great guys from Indiana. Ty is going to be doing it this weekend, so go check that out. We have this thing scheduled between now and the end of the year, so that every week these guys are just getting on there and saying a few words about what's on their heart, and then praying with the listeners of this podcast and the hunting community every single week as we start it. And I can't think of a cooler way to use our platform than joining everybody with a quick prayer. These videos are only like 4 to 6 minutes. They're not a church service or anything. It's not meant to replace church, but it's just meant to encourage us and unite us inside of the blood of Christ. And I'm really proud that these guys are stepping up and helping me with this project. So go check that out. I'm excited about it, and I just get to watch it after I produce the video. It's kind of fun.
They've been good, no doubt about it. It's definitely worth your time to tune into those. If you can't do it on Sunday evening, find time during the week to check it out.
All right. Well, thanks everybody. We had just the last 4 weeks, another huge spike in listeners to the podcast. Our numbers are higher than they've ever been. So we thank you for sharing and telling your friends about us. Don, before we sign off real quick, remind people about submitting a question, where they can do it, and if we use it on the air, what they get in return.
Yeah, just go to chasinggiants.com, and there'll be a form there where you can fill out your name, address, and your question. And there's a place to put your T-shirt size. So we send out free T-shirts if we use your question. I'm behind about 3 weeks, Terry, so I'm going to have to package up a bunch of T-shirts this week. If you don't have access to the internet, you can also just mail your question. Be sure to put your shipping address and your T-shirt size when you do that, but you can send those to Real World Wildlife Products, Post Office Box 55 in Arthur, Illinois, and the zip code is 61911. And either way, we'll get them. We've been getting more and more. I'm telling you what, it's hard to pick each week. It takes something unique, like a unique perspective, or for us to tee off on something, a new question. So keep them keep them coming.
And probably the most anticipated question, we probably should have done this early in the show, give people a quick update on NutriCrave deer corn. You made a post about that today that we shared on Real World site. Tell everybody what status we are in getting that corn picked and packaged.
Yeah, we the moisture content of that corn in the field is still a little over 20%. And in order for us to store that corn or put it in a bag or put it in a bulk bag, it's got to be 14% or it'll mold. So we're letting it dry down in the field. And what we're finding is because of the high fat level in that corn, it's not drying down like a lot of other corn. So they did pick the end rows off of one field just to test it. And the grain bin that it's going in has a dryer on it, and they wanted to get everything fired up and make sure it was going to work. So they just did a little bit and put it in that grain bin. But talking to Dwayne today, it looks like mid-October they'll probably harvest that, and short time later it'll be ready to go. We've already sold, Dwayne said, over 2,000 bushel that we've taken orders for. So if there's any real world dealers out there and you want to place an order for it, call the office and get your order in. We've got I think we've got 3 dealers that have bought full semi loads.
To clarify that, it's not available yet to the consumer. We're letting dealers order it right now. We haven't opened up orders to individuals on the website yet.
Yeah, we'll do that as soon as it's available, but we're letting our dealers get their orders in because we try to send as much business through our dealers as possible. If they're bringing in a full semi, that's a whole lot cheaper per pallet than it is for us to ship one pallet or a few bags to somebody. Right. So we're trying to help our dealers out there.
All right, sounds good. Go check out Chasing Giants TV Sunday night prayer time. Please continue to keep Don and his family as his daughter battles cancer in your prayers. Make sure if you are successful in the field and have a good photo op in your Osseo gear, you're tagging Osseo if you want to be chosen for to be in the Chasing Giants podcast every week. I can't think of anything else, and before we just tee up this ending and let everybody get a different perspective on the rest of their day.
I'm just going to say, God bless everybody. Have a great week.
Take care.
Chasing Giants has been brought to you by Osseo Camo, Via Farm Real Estate Company, 360 Hunting Blinds, Victory Chevrolet, Real World Wildlife Products, Matthews Archery, Novix Tree Stands, Gingerich Tree Farm, WildlifeFarming.com, Quiet Cat, and Vortex Optics. Thanks for listening, and tune in next week for another episode of Chasing Giants.